Gravity seems obvious. Things fall, objects stay on the ground, nothing just drifts away. It all appears settled, not to be questioned. We learn it early, we see it constantly, and because it's supposedly always there, it is not something we feel that needs to be examined anymore. But what if something this familiar is not what we think it is? Welcome to Look Again, the channel where we do not tell you what is true, but where we question what you accept and assume to be true. To be fair, the idea of gravity doesn't come out of nowhere. Everything around us seems to support it. You drop something, it falls. You throw something, it comes back down. Over time, a pattern forms, and then a name is given to that pattern, an explanation, a structure. And once that happens, it becomes one of those things we stop questioning and laugh at those who do. Not because we've examined it deeply, but because it looks obvious, so why question that which is apparent, right? But let's slow down for a moment. When we say something is pulled by gravity, what exactly are we observing? Is it the pull itself, or just the movement that follows? Next time you drop something, watch closely. You see it fall. You see the motion clearly. But do you actually see a force pulling it? Or are you just interpreting the movement based on what you've been told to see? Because the motion is visible, immediate, but the cause is not something we can directly see. And that distinction is easy to miss, especially because the explanation arrives so quickly. It almost feels like part of the observation itself. And then something subtle starts to appear. Because once something like this is explained, once a concept like gravity is introduced, it tends to stop feeling like an explanation. It starts feeling like a conclusion. We don't usually return to it as a question. We return to it as something already understood. And yet, we have never directly observed what is being described. Only the outcome, only the motion. So there's a quiet gap here between what is seen and what is assumed to be fully understood. And that gap usually doesn't feel like a gap at all. It feels like closure. So maybe the question isn't just what is gravity. Maybe it's what we are actually observing when things fall or stay where they are. What is it? Because the movement is clear, but the explanation might not be as straightforward as it first appears. As usually, we are gonna take a look at a few layers, and there are many, as always, so we'll try to keep it nice and neat. So the layer number one is motion and cause, or motion versus cause. When something moves, we almost instantly look for a cause. It's automatic. The moment an object falls, the explanation appears with it. But if you slow that down, there is this small gap. The movement happens first. The explanation follows almost immediately, so quickly that it feels like one single event. But are they actually the same? Or is one something we see and the other one something we just infer? Layer number two is the behavior of forces. Think about how forces we directly experience behave. A push usually comes from contact. A pull also implies something connecting two things. There's always a sense that something is happening between objects, a visible relationship, a clear interaction. At least in everyday experience, that's what we see, that's what we expect. But then gravity enters the picture, and we describe it as something that acts without contact. across space continuously. And that's where things start to feel slightly unstable, because now a question appears underneath the explanation. When we say force, are we still talking about the same kind of thing we experience directly? Or has the word started to cover something that doesn't quite behave like what it originally referred to? And if that's the case, are we still observing the phenomenon itself, or only the description we've learned to place over it? This brings us to layer 3, density. There's something else that often goes unnoticed. Objects don't all behave the same way. Some sink, some float, some rise, depending on the environment they're in. A balloon moves upward, a stone moves downward, but both are simply moving through a certain medium. And there is a consistency of the object and the medium itself, based on their relation to it. A small stone will drop to the bottom of the sea, but a massive ship will float on top of it. How can this be? So now the question shifts slightly. When something falls, is it always being pulled by gravity? Or is it only moving according to how it relates to the medium that surrounds it? The layer number 4 is scale and sensitivity. And this is another detail that's easy to overlook. In most situations, smaller and lighter things respond first. A light object moves easily, a heavier one requires more force. You see it with wind, with water, and with almost anything that applies force. So if something is strong enough to influence something as large as our planet, how would that same influence appear on smaller, unattached objects? Would it be subtle or more noticeable? And if it were acting continuously, how would the difference show up? The layer number 5 is an extension of the layer number 4, because we are talking about opposing forces. And this is a pattern we're, again, very familiar with. When two equal forces act in opposite directions, they balance, right? They create an equilibrium. We see it in scales, in tension, in simple mathematical or mechanical systems. Opposing forces cancel each other out. So when multiple bodies are interacting, pulling in different directions, what exactly maintains the balance we observe? If everything is influencing everything else, or how do those interactions settle into something stable? The layer number 6 is language. And this is another layer that sits quietly underneath all of this. Not in what is happening, but in how quickly an event gets turned into something we can name. Because the moment something is named, it doesn't just get described, it starts to get fixed. Gravity, force, pull, and somehow very quickly the experience stops feeling open-ended. It starts to feel contained, almost as if it has already been accounted for. So the question becomes slightly different here. When we say gravity pulls, are we still describing what is directly observed, or are we only repeating the words we've learned to define the experience? If we follow this pattern, it starts to extend far beyond. In many situations, something happens, we observe it, and then we explain it. But over time, the explanation and observation start to blend together. It can even feel like the explanation was always there, built into what we saw. As if the meaning came with the experience instead of being added afterward. And when we expect a clear cause, we also expect a consistent pattern. But what happens when the pattern doesn't behave consistently? When timing shifts, when intensity varies, when the same explanation seems to apply differently in different situations? If that happens consistently, how would we notice the difference between what we observe and how we explain it? If the explanation feels automatic, Does the observation ever stand on its own? And if something seems to make sense, do we keep looking at it or stop there and move on? And if patterns don't fully align but we continue using the same explanation, what happens to everything that doesn't quite fit? So when something falls or stays in place, what are we really seeing? A force acting, or a movement we've learned to explain in a certain way? And if something this familiar can feel so obvious without being directly observed, what else might we be accepting simply because it appears to make sense?